Views from the World Tree. On today's episode, we discuss the merits of aromatherapy. We have a mini book club, and we find the true meaning of Halloween. And now, on with the show.
For my personal news this week, not a whole lot has been happening. At work, one of my coworkers is leaving the company to pursue more exciting dreams and stuff. And so I've been spending some pretty long days trying to get knowledge passed down from him. But I did have a chance to break out my old DSLR camera, my old Nikon camera, and play around with some manual photography, which I haven't done for quite a while. But it was pretty fun. I think last week we had talked about how the leaves were starting to change here, and there's a nice carpet of golden leaves on my back lawn. So I went out there with the dog and was taking some shots. It's pretty cool. It's really satisfying. I was watching a video by Smarter Every Day recently about manual photography, and he was talking about how it's so much more gratifying when you have to set up the shot ahead of time, get all your settings dialed in, hit the shutter, and then hope everything comes together. So I was able to get some pretty good shots. I'll probably throw one of them up on our blog post for this episode, just so you have some reference. But yeah, that was my news. Oh, and something else that was interesting. I was looking up back when I bought my camera. So this camera is a Nikon D3100 with just a standard 18 to 55 millimeter lens. And I bought it almost exactly 10 years ago. It was in November of 2011. And I was curious, so I looked it up. It's still being sold. It's a pretty popular kind of mid-range DSLR. It is now actually $50 more than when I bought it, which is crazy to me because consumer electronics are not known for holding their value, especially over 10 years. So I don't know if it's some of the supply chain stuff that we've talked about, or if it's just, that good of a camera. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. It's been great for me, but yeah, it's kind of interesting.
That is interesting. I've heard of that a lot of times. One of my coworkers, kind of to go into the supply chain thing, she got rear-ended the other day, and insurance paid her more for her totaled car than what she paid for her car 10 years ago.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think everything's just more expensive. But that's cool. I've never gotten into photography, but it's always been something that I wanted to try. And for those of you listening on podcast, my co-host is nodding like you all can hear. I guess that'll be my hint to jump into my news. Yeah, kind of like Adam, nothing really big has been going on. I've been under a lot of stress and kind of burning the candle from both ends, and ended up getting sick over the weekend. So that was not fun. It did force me to kind of slow down, which I think is exactly why my body told me that it was time to get sick. So I ended up reading 2 books by C.J. Box. I mentioned him in a previous episode. So I finished book number 4 and book number 5, which is Trophy Hunt and Out of Range. And it's actually kind of funny. So Trophy Hunt is actually, before I tell you what the book's about, the series, it's the Joe Pickett's series, and it follows a Wyoming game warden who's basically state minimum wage labor slave, just kind of going out and protecting the elk herds from poaching and whatnot, as game wardens are meant to do. And it wouldn't be a book series if there wasn't some drama. So he solves murders that happen out in his while he's out on the range. So this book, actually, I picked it up a day or two after we finished our Roswell episode where we talked about aliens. And the whole premise was cattle mutilations and a UFO hunter that moved into the county. And the timing was just impeccable. I had to laugh at that. But on Goodreads, it didn't get a lot of really high reviews because people thought it was a science fiction book and didn't stick around to see how he solved the murders, which were not supernatural. I don't want to give too much away, but we'll just say they were not aliens. But I enjoyed it. It had fishing and backpacking and horseback riding and a little bit of rodeo in it, so it was kind of fun.
Nice. Sounds like a great story. I like Goodreads, and I mean, it's built into my Kindle, which is what I read most of my books on, so it's kind of a freebie. But I've noticed some of the stuff on there can be kind of snobby when it comes to science fiction, which I don't know. I grew up reading science fiction and fantasy, but so it's kind of sad sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It took me almost 30 years to decide that I enjoyed mysteries. I always gave my mom and my grandma crap for reading mysteries because I'm like, oh, they're so predictable that you can always know what's going on. And now I just kind of enjoy it. It's like a logic puzzle that you read.
Nice.
So, yep, I'd recommend that. Before we move on to the current events, I did want to say that I think 3 episodes ago, Adam mentioned the book Rewilding
Mm-hmm.
in his personal news, and I downloaded it on Audible so I could listen to it while I'm driving to and from work. So I don't have the paper copy, which is how I prefer to read, but I definitely have something to keep my mind occupied while I drive. And it is just as Earthchild hippie as he complained the very first time we talked about it, but I honestly do see that it's going to be a pretty decent story as I get through it.
Yeah, it gets better.
Yes, I see. Good news, everyone!
So you mentioned that this is actually a pretty good segue. You mentioned that you unfortunately had been ill this week. Maybe you need to, if you have an aromatherapy sprayer, maybe you should check that. Because my current event is an article from Ars Technica. The mystery of the deadly U.S. infections have been solved. An aromatherapy spray at Walmart was to blame. So the gist of it is on Friday, apparently there had been a mystery that the CDC has been investigating for several months. Maybe you should write a book about it. But there was some really strange bacterial infections across 4 seemingly unrelated states. Unfortunately, 2 people died. One of them was a kid. But they confirmed that there was a strain of, and I'm going to butcher this, B. pseudomali. I don't know. Anyway, basically a strain of bacteria was found in this aromatherapy Better Homes and Gardens brand spray that's sold at Walmart. And through a little bit of work, they were able to track it to like specific states and specific stores where it was sold. So, yeah, I'm not going to go into details about which ones are affected. There's like 5 or 6 different scents, and the CDC has a list you can go on and see if your store carried any of the affected ones. But it's pretty crazy. It's pretty cool what they're able to track with science and universal product codes across our supply chain and batch numbers and things like that. So that was all I had.
I mean, that is fascinating. We live in a strange strange world. Yeah, I will not be checking any of my aromatherapy things because I actually don't own any. I've never put much stock into it. I've seen people that truly believe, and it seems to work for them. So I'm not going to tell them they're crazy, but I don't believe that it works unless you put faith into it. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, we've got a few like scented candle warmer things that my wife likes just because they make the house smell nice. But we also live right next to some farmland out on the city limits, so my aromatherapy is just open the window. But I also, grew up in agricultural areas, and not everybody likes that particular aroma.
I will say that aromatherapy is really nice, except for when a cold front moves in and you get the smell of. For us, there's a meat packing plant and some turkey
Oof.
farms that kind of just push that smell in.
Yeah, those are rough.
But I assume for you it'll be cow cow manure and,
Mostly,
and
yeah, mostly potato fields, a little bit of cows and horses, but which horses don't smell bad. Cows do.
cows are
Horses don't.
bad.
Horses just smell like grass.
Processed grass.
Yeah.
My current event, I looked all over. I tried to grab current events that don't tick me off, and everything that I read in the news was ticking me off this week. So I decided not to do a true current event. Instead, I'm just going to have like this little discussion. Every morning when I wake up, I'll turn on the news and I'll eat my breakfast and kind of get caught up on what to expect for the day. Usually I just watch it to see how long it's going to take me to drive into work because I hate traffic. But I've noticed that there's a huge influx of people, like fatal road rages and cars getting stolen and high speed chases. And I was reading today about a plane that was flying from New York to California that had to land in Denver so the U.S. Marshals could arrest somebody because they were being a jerk to the flight crew. And just I don't know, it I feel like this whole situation, this whole sickness that's kind of gone on is just like weighing down on everybody. And I just, I just wanted to take a moment and say, dang guys, we can do so much better. I mean, there's no need for the, for what I see in the news every day. It really gets me down. So that's my current event. Just the news is getting me down. It's making me sad.
Yeah, it's been depressing lately. I don't know if you saw this, but here in my area, so I don't live in Boise, but I live in a suburb about 40 minutes away. We had a shooter at the mall um, on, I want to say it was on Friday. No, Monday. Sorry, more recent. Um, so yeah, some douche who I'm not gonna say their name because that's what they want.
There goes our clean rating.
Well, I'm holding back, but decided that they were pissed off at the world, so they were going to go. Shot off like 18 rounds, killed 2 people, injured 2 others. So, but
Yeah.
and they were shot by police, and then the shooter, that is, was shot by police, and then died in the hospital later. So, yeah, good riddance.
It's getting worse.
So, yeah, I'm like you. I try not to dwell on it. I try and focus on the positive.
Yeah. I mean, that's all you can do.
Yep. If all goes according to plan, you should be listening to this on October the 31st, Sunday, which in the United States and um, kind of in a broader sense, starting to be adopted around the world, is the holiday of Halloween. And so we wanted to take a look at kind of the origins of Halloween, which other cultures have had similar celebrations and festivals, and kind of how it's evolved over time. The first thing we wanted to take a look at is in the ancient Norse Scandinavian culture. There was a celebration or a festival called Vaetrnatr, which is translates from Old Norse literally to winter nights. So Vaetrnatr. This was celebrated at the end of fall when the nights were turning to winter. And it also marked the beginning of the wild hunt, which is a recurring motif in a few different cultural mythologies, but perhaps most famously in the Norse. And the ancient people of Norway and Scandinavia believed that this time of the year was when the power of the dark, mysterious, and the dead was at their strongest. And so some of the rites and rituals were developed because they wanted to keep these evil denizens on their side. So during the first dark winter month, uh, they would try to offer their friendship to the dark powers that began to stir. The hope was that they would aid them through the darkness and cold into another season of light and growth when they could plant their crops and start to live their lives again. It's interesting that in Vaetrnatr and in Norse and Scandinavian culture, the dark powers were not necessarily seen as evil, but they were seen as powerful, and it was important to seek their assistance. So this is kind of in contrast to kind of the more modern idea of Halloween, when you have like evil, devil uh, aligned creatures. It wasn't quite seen that way back in the day. So, how did the ancient Scandinavian people seek the assistance of these dark powers? Well, it was done in perhaps the most Norse way possible by offering them beer and meat. Um, Specifically, there was a sacrifice that was done this time of year called the Alfablot, or the sacrifice to the elves, so the Elfblot. It was held between the end of autumn and the beginning of winter, so right about this time of the year. And we actually don't know a lot about the celebration itself. It was surrounded by a lot of secrecy. And normally, in that area of the world in that time, there was a strict code of hospitality. But during Alphablot, strangers were not allowed to enter farmsteads. So it's a kind of departure from normal life. Um, Most historians seem to agree that the elves referenced um, in the writings and the sagas of the time were closely associated with the ancestors of the people that were performing the rituals. So it's pretty generally held belief that during Alphablot, the elves were honored as the spirits of the dead ancestors and kind of worshipped as part of the life force of the family.
That brings us to kind of something that was happening around a similar time, but in the complete opposite of the Great White North, that is the Scandinavia and northern Germania. So down in Rome, Italy, along the Mediterranean, the early church had similar festivals. And when I say the early church, I mean the early Christian church. So they had a festival that celebrated the martyrs of the early church. So the saints that had given their lives to spread the gospel of their Christ, and that it's believed by historians that this was a festival that took place in the springtime, but most feasts in the church at that time had a vigil held the night before, to usher in the spirit of God to watch over the feast, and so they would have a vigil right before the festival. So the earliest recorded feast of this All Saints or All Martyrs Day was around 500 Common Era, and so that was spring. And then historians have found records from monasteries in Ireland and Scotland, from the Irish Insular Church, which is similar to the old Catholic Church, just not overseen by the Pope. It's each church or parish had their own priest that was in charge. And they say that this feast of the spirits of the All Souls was celebrated as early as 800 in the Ireland and the Isles of Scotland, and they believe that these were actually held in conjunction with the pagan rites of Samhain, which is the Celtic celebration of winter night, or the beginning of the dark half of the year. So I wanted to throw that into this discussion because I just think it's fascinating, that up in Scandinavia we have these celebrations to the souls of the dead of the family, and then down in the Mediterranean we have this feast to the souls of the dead of the church and of family in All Souls Day. And you can see that even today in Mexico and Latin America, where they celebrate Dia de los Muertos around this time. So anyway, on to Samhain.
So Samhain, the word Samhain is Celtic, specifically Gaelic. And this was, so the old Celtic holidays were, from what I was reading in my research, were all celebrated starting at sundown on the previous day, and the celebration would go through sunrise on the next day. So that's how it came to be on kind of the evening of the last day of October. The word Samhain comes from the name of the month in that calendar, which I don't remember the specific name. But it's Samhain is taken pretty much directly from the name of the month. And it celebrates the end of the harvest and the beginning of the darker part of the year, similar to the Winter Nights festival. And specifically, it's seen as a time when the veil between this world and the next is at its thinnest. And spirits and fairies and various supernatural creatures are able to cross over into our world. These spirits that would cross over, the people of that time would leave offerings to them so that their livestock would survive the winter. Also, similar to Winter Nights and Dia de los Muertos, ancestors are thought to return. And so a big tradition during Samhain is to leave an extra place of food set at your table for whatever ancestors might come back. And Samhain has seen a bit of a resurgence lately. In the present day, modern practitioners of Wicca celebrate Samhain as one of, if not the most important, of the 4 yearly Sabbats on the wheel of the year.
All right. I have to say it. I think it's really interesting that every single festival, whether it's All Hallows Eve or Samhain or Vaetrnatr, that they, did I say that right? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I second guessed myself as soon as it went off my tongue. Um, I find it fascinating that they all have to do with communing with the dead, that they all have to do with coming together as your family, and at least the Celtic and Norse was more about a celebration of what the land gives us and an acknowledgement of the spirits that help humans survive here, kind of thing. I just think it's kind of cool that these events kind of evolved separate from, but alongside.
Yeah, I think. I think some of it has a bit of an internal logical consistency to it. If you're in a um, ancient civilization and agricultural livestock is basically how you survive, it makes sense that you're going to give thanks to whatever god or gods you believe in for the harvest that you had and to ask for help to make it through the winter. Which, if you're living on whatever you're able to store up from your harvest, it's not going to be easy. Um, so that part of it makes sense. It is interesting, like you said, the aspect that all three of these kind of main um, influences that we looked at with how they have to deal with kind of looking back at either at ancestors that came before or at spirits of those that have passed on. It's interesting how that became a part of it. Um, that part seems a little bit more mystical, um, maybe not quite as down to earth and pragmatic as giving thanks for a bountiful harvest. But it is interesting, like you pointed out, that all three of these different cultures have similar beliefs and practices around this time of year.
Well, um, when I was researching the notes for the show, I used my student account to access some scholarly articles about the history of Halloween. And one that they found was from an archaeology journal based out of Scotland, and they found evidence that another aspect of Samhain was to kind of communicate to to use divination to figure out fortunes for you or your family when the veil is at the thinnest. And so thinking about that, I just looking at the appeasement to the land spirits, right? Whether it's the elf from Scandinavia or the Fae, fairies, Elsie from the Celtic traditions, or even to keep demons at bay. It does kind of feel like all three, again, do believe that there's some powerful magic that occurs as the days start to show how short they are. And I don't know. Again, an interesting observation.
Yeah, it's when I was researching, admittedly, I spent most of my time with the Norse um, aspects of it, just because that's what I am kind of drawn to, and that's what interests me. But they had a lot of that same divination that was done, at least according to a couple of the sources, which I'll admit we're not we're not scholarly, but I tried to only look at reputable things. So, but yeah, they mentioned that one of the common things um, in Norse culture was that if you went and sat on a grave or on a burial mound for the entire night, you were supposed to be able to, or you would be granted full divinatory satyr skalder powers and would be able to commune with your ancestors, like you and I are talking, right, over video chat. So yeah, that was definitely a thing there as well, which I thought was interesting. And then one thing that as I'm talking, that I just realized is with the Dia de los Muertos, has a lot of parallels to the Wild Hunt from Norse mythology. That was supposedly the beginning of that was marked by the beginning of winter nights. So it's there's definitely a lot of parallels, and it is interesting to think about.
Yeah, maybe season 2, Halloween Origins, we'll talk about other cultures and the thing, because I do, from my understanding, is Dia de los Muertos is very much a combination of Spanish, Granadan, Catholic, and native Mexican festivals kind of rolled into one. So it's got like Arabic influence, it's got Catholic with the Halloween, with the All Hallows, and these native populations as well, which makes me wonder if there's similar stuff with the Native American populations with their fall festivals type of thing.
Yeah, maybe it would be interesting to look at. I'm not gonna, pretend to, or I'm not gonna speculate because honestly I have zero knowledge about that, but it would be interesting to look at.
Yeah. I'll speculate because I like speculating, but actually, I like you. I have no knowledge. It's something that I'd have to look up. So, if there's something there, perhaps that'll be season 2, Halloween. All right. So we've ended most of our main topics with a. What do you think? Do you think that the veil is thinned during this time? That there's magic in the air?
You're asking me, or a rhetorical question for the listeners?
Both.
Okay.
I'll answer it too.
Yes, I do. I like we've talked about on the past couple episodes. I've been making a really concerted effort to really increase my mindfulness, the amount of time I spend on like introspection and also being outside in nature. And I've definitely noticed that kind of primal connection to nature and to the world and whatever spirits or energy or whatever lives in the world. I'm definitely feeling that more, whether that's a side effect of like meditation or whether it has exclusively to do with the time of year, I can't say, but all I know is what my experience has been. And it's, yeah, it's been a lot easier to get into that headspace. And I've felt a strong connection with my ancestors and just with the land that my house sits on. So I'm going to say yes.
All right. And with that, no, just kidding. I'll answer it.
Baited me.
I'm not going to do that to you.
Joke's on you. I'm the one that edits the podcast. So.
Oh, well, that's fair. I completely agree. I have not been doing the mindfulness or the meditation that you have. I know in the past when I have been doing that I do find it a lot easier to feel forces outside of my own. But I do have to say that there's certain points of the year when I feel relatives that I've lost in my personal life that I knew personally. So not like far back ancestry, but there's certain times in the year when I definitely feel their presence stronger. And I, in a strange way, I do feel like the equinox, the autumn equinox till probably about Thanksgiving is one of those times when I definitely feel a lot of connection to my family, both alive and not alive. There is a connection here. And so I actually, kind of looking at our topic, we've got 3 different cultures with similar sayings and similar doings with the veil being thin during this time. And so, yes, I completely believe that there is a magic in the air around this time. So, yeah, I'm not just going to have you answer a hard question and then say goodnight. But I do think it's probably time that we end with our mindfulness moment. Speaking of connecting. So every week, Adam and I look at the topic at hand, and then we kind of decide what we're going to do, and we alternate who chooses the mindfulness moment. And this week, for the Halloween episode, I was looking through the internet. I was just trying to find something that wasn't from the Havamal, wasn't from the Poetic Eddas, or from the books and traditions that we normally pull from. And I found a poem by Raven Willow Rune that she entitled Samhain. And so I'm going to read that, and then we'll kind of get the thoughts on that. So here's Samhain. Beyond the velvet curtain, our loved one waits unseen. They know what we are thinking. They know just where we've been. Samhain is upon us. The veil is thin and weak. Our ancestors send messages, guides for the answers we seek. Sit quiet now and listen. The voices whisper loud. Remember them with fondness, fallen comrades of whom we're proud. The line of ancestors is a long one. Traditions are growing strong. They walked the path before me. They show me where I belong. So I chose that poem mostly because of all the look at the reconnection with your family, reconnection with lost loved ones, lost ancestors that we talked about with the roots of Halloween. And this poem just pulled at my heartstrings. It really, the cadence of it, the words of it, everything about it, it just felt like it rang true for the topic at hand. And so I really appreciate Raven's words and how they were written down. And I appreciate the message of everywhere we go, there's people who have led the way and there's people that'll come behind us, kind of thing.
Yeah, I've never read this poem before, but I would echo what you said. It definitely rings true with a lot of what I've been thinking and feeling lately. It kind of cuts pretty deep, if I'm being honest. It without going into a lot of detail, I've been on a bit of a kind of a spiritual self-searching journey for a couple years, and this whole concept of our ancestors have walked this path before, and they send us messages. You know, they know what we're thinking. They know where we've been. Definitely rings true with some of the experiences that I've had, which honestly, I'm not going to go into on this podcast because they're pretty personal, but definitely a good poem. So kudos to the author. It's a good one.
All right. Let's take a moment to collect ourselves because I did not realize how hard that poem was going to hit me until I read it. Dang! Yeah, that hit me like a ton of bricks. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode, and don't forget to join us next week as we honor our fallen soldiers in our salute to Veterans Day. See you then.
Do you have a request for a subject that you'd like us to talk about on a future episode? Or is there a particular topic for which you have a passion and you'd like to come on the show as a guest? Send us an email to podcast@viewsfromtheworldtree.com or message us through one of our social media accounts, the links to which can be found on our new website, viewsfromtheworldtree.com. We look forward to hearing from you. If you have a moment, we would appreciate if you could leave us a rating on iTunes or on the podcast app of your choice. It makes a big difference, especially for new podcasts that are just starting out. Thanks.